Excellency Yoweri Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, His Excellency Denis Francis, President of the 78th session of the UN General Assembly, His Excellency Antonio Gutierrez, Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished heads of state and government and of other delegations, dear participants. It is an honor for us to participate in this great event organized by our sister republic, Uganda. I would like to restate what a pleasure it is to meet on African soil for those of us who share deep ties of brotherhood and sisterhood and solidarity. The Cuban people have inherited a fighting spirit and a capacity for resistance from you. Africa deserves our respect and support in the path to development, which is why I would like to greet its leaders with warm affection. I would particularly like to acknowledge the leadership of President Yoweri Museveni, promoter of peace and stability in Africa and the world. Your Excellencies, in these challenging times, when many tactics deployed to divide the countries of the South, unity should be the order of the day for the G77 and China. It is essential and urgent for us to work effectively and together to change the current unfair world order and free ourselves from the disadvantaged positions that are a byproduct of centuries of colonialism, neo-colonialism, and dependence once and for all. 2023 was a year of great challenges and complex processes that proved how much we can accomplish when we work decisively in defense of our legitimate interests and aspirations. Thanks to the collective efforts of the members of our group, we managed to move forward on the path towards where we deserve and need to be given the current international context. The successful summit of heads of state and government of the G77 and China, which was held last September in Havana, was a necessary and urgent meeting out of which we emerged stronger. The summit of our leaders in the context of the 28th Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Climate Change, or COP28, for the first time, will set an important precedent for the future work of the G77 as regards international climate negotiations. The group has also been a key player in different UN negotiations, including those on sustainable development. It has also been involved in preparations for the Summit of the Future. The positions of the G77 have made a significant contribution to the adoption of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and the sustainable use of marine biological diversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. Cuba's leadership of the G77 and China in several international meetings outside of the group's traditional scope, such as the Summit for a New Global Financial Pact and the BRICS Summit, have allowed us to make the interests of the developing world heard in these critical fora. We would like to thank the group's members for their active and constructive participation in the different events held in Cuba last year, especially at the ministerial meetings on education, culture, tourism, and the environment. Said meetings fostered substantive debates and agreements on practical actions having to do with issues of fundamental importance for the South. We invite you to continue to work in concert on the implementation of the 17 projects designed during our presidency for the benefit of our members. Likewise, we should continue to give impetus to the G77 NAM Joint Coordination Committee, which will make our South-led proposals more coherent and efficient. Uganda's presidency of both groups this year is a step in that direction. In short, 2023 was a year of commendable collective action, which produced undeniable results, and we thank you all. Excellencies, honorable delegates, as regards our contribution to this discussion and to properly follow up on the issues covered at the G77 summit held in Havana last September, allow me to list some of our proposals for practical action your delegations may want to consider. We feel that they will help us achieve our objectives. Number one, present a draft resolution to the UN General Assembly before the end of the year on behalf of the G77 member states and China, a resolution on to propose a meeting, a high-level meeting on science, technology, and innovation. This meeting should agree on practical steps forwards to guarantee that science, technology, and innovation contribute to accelerating progress towards full application of 2030 Agenda and the Addis Ababa Action Plan. Number two, to hold a meeting of ministers and high authorities of science, technology, and innovation of our group in the first half of 2025. The objective of this meeting would be to identify the main proposals that the G77 and China would put forth at said high-level meeting of the UN General Assembly. Number three, to institutionalize or make official the celebration of summits of leaders of the G77 and China in the context of the conference, the COP meetings on climate change. This initiative, which happened for the first time at COP28, held last year in Dubai, demonstrated how relevant and important it was. It would make it easier to achieve for our group to achieve concerted action regarding the divide in climate negotiations. Number four, to hold a World Forum on Science, Technology, and Innovation of countries of the South in the second half of 2024. This would show the advances that our countries have made in these areas, promote joint research projects, and different partnerships that would reduce our dependence on Western markets. This could be the ideal context in which to create strategies that would revitalize the Consortium on Science, Technology, and Innovation in the South, as agreed upon at the summit of Havana. Dear friends, for Cuba, it was very source of much pride and honor to lead the G77 in China for the first time. We did this in difficult circumstances, given that we are subjected to a criminal financial, economic, trade and financial embargo since the second half of 2019 that was and has taken on, made even deeper. We would deeply like to thank the members of the group for the unilateral coercive measures for their support in fighting these measures and this unfair blockade and embargo that we've been subjected to for more than 60 years. In the name of the Cuban people and government, I would like to thank you sincerely to the members of the group, to the UN system, and the Secretariat of the G77 for their support, the support they have always given us throughout our leadership. Today, we pass the baton to our sister nation, Uganda, aware of this critical juncture in time that we are living through, and with the knowledge that there's still much left to do for the well-being and development of our people. Uganda can always count on the total support of Cuba. We wish you the best of luck. Cuba will always fight for the defense of unity within our rich diversity. Together, with legitimate interests and joint aspirations, we will be stronger and our voice will be heard. Thank you. Now, I would like to call His Excellency Sultan bin Al-Muharrai, the Ministry of State of Foreign Affairs for the State of Qatar, which was the host country of the Second South Summit, to come up here, as well as this head of delegation of the nation of Qatar will give us a speech.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, Your Excellency President Yoweri Museveni, Your Excellencies, Majesties, Heads of States and Governments, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, may the peace of God be upon you all. I address you today after a long time since the Second South Summit in Doha in 2005, whereby we issued the Doha Declaration that reiterated the values of solidarity and unified action via the Group of 77 and China in order to reiterate common interests of developing countries through developing international development and multilateral action and cooperation between the South. Distinguished guests, our developing countries require to increase and promote solidarity and cooperation in order to face the complex challenges of our world, which require us to face them unified and in concertation. Qatar lays great importance for cooperation between the countries of the South and to promote the role of G77 and China. Doha has hosted in March 2023 the 5th UN Conference of the Least Developed Countries, LDCs, whereby we have adopted the Doha Action Plan for the least developing countries for 2022-2031, and at the margin of the conference, the ministerial meeting for cooperation between the countries of the South was held, and His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani has contributed $60 million, 50 million of which will be allocated for projects that promote the resilience of least developing countries in different fields, and the contributions of Qatar in sustainability and in humanitarian aid has continued in different fora for the brotherly countries of the South countries, whereby the contributions of the South countries funds has been more than $7 billion from 2014 to 2021. Your Excellencies and Majesties, in light of developments that the Arab region has been witnessing since the 7th of October 2023, the Palestinian people is, of course, witnessing an unprecedented aggression, and here we reiterate the State of Qatar's position in supporting the, of course, still in the Palestinian right in self-determination and establishing their their state according to the 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as their capital, and of course having their rights, which is a just, of course, position based on international law and the UN Charter and the UN resolutions. And it goes in par with the constant position of the G77 since its establishment. It is the position of all peace-loving people. Also, we call for the support and providing humanitarian assistance to civilians in the Gaza, especially in the most, of course, destroyed and affected regions. Distinguished guests, today, of course, we celebrate 60 years since the inception of G77 and China. And the G77 played a pivotal role in defending the rights of developing countries in the UN, and the G77 has, of course, achieved many successes in promoting cooperation between the countries of the South, and we still have a long way to go, and would like to reiterate again our support to the causes of the countries of the South, and we work on them seriously through our membership in the group, in G77. Mr. Chair, in conclusion, while, of course, we transfer the chairmanship to the sisterly country of Uganda, we wish you success in your endeavors and reiterate again the position of the State of Qatar that supports the countries of the South based on the principles of cooperation, consultation, and unified work and solidarity. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Expreso la gracia a su excelencia, señor Sultan Bin.
Now, Sultan, thank you very much for your speech. Sultan, now I would like to call the President of the Republic of Uganda to formally take the lead of the G77 plus China for 2024.
His Excellency Salvador Varedes Mesa, Vice President of the Republic of Cuba and Chair of the G77 and China for the past 3 years, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Dennis Francis, President of the 78th session of the UN General Assembly, Her Excellency the Vice President of Uganda, and all other government and party leaders of Uganda, fellow Ugandans, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all to Uganda, the Pearl of Africa, for the third South Summit of the Group of 77 and China. Your personal participation at this summit, which is being held 18 years after the second summit that took place in the state of Qatar in June 2005, demonstrates your commitment to the work of the G77 and China. I commend His Excellency Miguel Mario Diaz-Canel Bermudez, President of the Republic of Cuba, for the exemplary leadership of the G77 and China in 2023. I would like to thank His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamadi Al Thani, Amir of the State of Qatar, for hosting our last summit. The group of 77 developing countries was founded in 1964 at the first session of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, At the time, these countries were faced with challenges of basic development. It was the first organized effort by the developing countries to unite to steer their countries on the path of the economic development in the unjust world economic order. Building on their joint declaration at the conclusion of the first session of the UNCTAD, these 77 developing countries, at their first ministerial meeting held in Algiers, united by common aspirations, agreed to identify collective interests and to pursue their joint efforts towards economic and social development, peace, and prosperity. This unity within the group has provided it to stay on course to promote and defend its members' collective economic interests at the United Nations. We must continue to embrace the founding principles that gave life to this heterogeneous and representative group of nations. Currently, the population of G77 and China represents 80% of the global population. In addition, its GDP accounts for more than 40% of the global GDP. This shows that in spite of the challenges, the group has registered progress in defending and promoting the interests of the developing countries. Uganda welcomed the theme of the third South Summit of the G77 and China. We meet at the time where the developing countries continue to face multiple global challenges that undermine our national and collective efforts to achieve sustainable development and our national development aspirations. We are now past halfway for the 2030. Unfortunately, the overall progress in the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, as agreed at the heads of states and government and high representatives meeting held at the United Nations in September 2015, falls short of the expectations, with the developing countries lagging far behind. Therefore, this summit is an appropriate forum to speak with the common voice as leaders of the Group of 77 and China on the urgent need for effective actions to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development during the remaining 7 years to realize our vision, shared principles and commitments, particularly the eradication of poverty in all its forms and dimensions, and the pledge that no one will be left behind. Excellencies, setting the path toward the realization of leaving no one behind requires that as a group we remain united in our demand to the international community to support developing countries to urgently address the global challenges, in particular poverty, hunger, digital divide, and climate change. We continue to witness the threat to multilateralism and the rise of unilateralism, which makes all susceptible to the impact of the current unjust international economic order. At the Group of 77 and China, we should continue to work collectively to ensure that we achieve an international economic order that is just and equitable as envisaged 59 years ago at the founding of the group. Uganda remains committed to the pledge to leave no one behind. In this context, Uganda has accelerated its national efforts to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in its entirety. We firmly believe that accelerating our progress towards the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda is critical to our national aspirations to ensure that no one is left behind, particularly during this time when we strive to build back better from the COVID pandemic and respond to other global challenges. Uganda has identified 4 key sectors of wealth creation and job creation that include commercial agriculture, industrialization, the development and modernization of services, and information and communication technology to support our socio-economic transformation. The government of Uganda is implementing targeted interventions in the above key sectors with a view to ensure that no one is left behind. In addition, we are equally prioritizing the promotion and protection of the human rights, including the right to development, in line with our national legal framework and international commitments. We wish to emphasize that the issue of human rights should be handled objectively and not politicized. South-South cooperation continues to play a critical role in supporting development countries in their efforts to achieve self-reliance. In this regard, I commend all developing countries for their contributions in strengthening this element of international cooperation. As countries in the Global South, we need to uphold this solidarity, which is a pillar in helping us safeguard our collective interests. We need to strengthen trade and investments among our countries. Therefore, the African Continental Free Trade Area, CFTA, leads the way to strengthen intra-trade among African countries to ensure prosperity for the African people. As developing countries, we should support the implementation of these regional trade blocs. We must also support strengthening triangular cooperation. Leaving no one behind cannot be realized without adequately addressing the challenges and needs faced by countries in special situations, in particular African countries, least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states, as well as specific challenges faced by many middle-income countries, conflict and post-conflict countries, and countries and peoples living under foreign occupation. These challenges continue to undermine the efforts of these countries to ensure that no one is left behind. In this regard, we support the call for the international community to provide targeted support to enable these countries to address their challenges. We also support the urgent reform of the international financial architecture to ensure that it is fit for purpose to respond to the financing needs of the developing countries. In our view, the international financial institutions and multilateral development banks must support the national priorities of developing countries without any conditionalities that infringe on these countries' sovereignty. Uganda is taking over the chairmanship of the group at an opportune time when we celebrate our 60th anniversary. I thank you all for entrusting Uganda with the chairing of the Group of 77 and China for 2024. We commend the African Group for endorsing our candidature for the chairmanship of the Group of 77 and China. 60 years of the existence will continue after 59 years of our group's existence, to yearn for a revitalized multilateral system which is capable of adequately addressing current and emerging global challenges. We firmly believe that multilateralism remains a fundamental and crucial mechanism for addressing our common challenges together as nations in solidarity. Uganda's chairmanship will strive to further promote acceleration of the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, scaling up action to address climate change and biodiversity loss, strengthening international tax cooperation, financing for development, fight against illicit financial flows, and strengthening digital cooperation among others. This year, 2024, is a crucial year with various intergovernmental processes at the United Nations on issues that are of paramount importance for the group. These include the inter alia Fourth International Conference for the Small Island Developing States, Third UN Conference on the Landlocked Developing Countries, ECOSOC, Economic and Social Council, Forum for Financing for Development Follow-up, ECOSOC, Economic Social Council High Political Forum on Sustainable Development, the Summit of the Future, Fourth International Conference on the Financing for Development, and 2024 UN Climate Change Conference, all of which demand that we at the group remain even more steadfast in promoting the interests of developing countries. Uganda therefore commits itself to consolidate the unity, to work for the consolidation of the unity, presence and influence of the group in these intergovernmental processes. In this regard, we look forward to working closely together with all the members of the group in this endeavor. In conclusion, it is critical that the Group of 77 and China remains united in its pursuit of collective interests at the United Nations. In the intergovernmental processes at the United Nations, we must ensure that priorities of the group are promoted and defended. I assure you that our team, led by the permanent representative in New York, has my full support to chair the Group of 77 and China. It is our sincere hope that our chairmanship will be an invaluable new step to the path toward the realization of our aspirations as developing countries. I thank you. Thank you so much. It is now my honor to invite His Excellency Denis Francis, President of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly, to address us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your Excellency, Mr. Yoweri Rugata Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda and Chairman of the Group of 77 and China. Your Excellency, Mr. Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, President of the Republic of Cuba. Their Excellencies, the Heads of State and Government. Your Excellency, Mr. Antonio Gutierrez, Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished ministers, participants, ladies and gentlemen. I feel both honored and privileged to address this august convocation on behalf of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Let me begin by conveying my sincere appreciation to His Excellency President Museveni and to the government of Uganda for hosting this third South Summit, a momentous event highlighting the unshakable commitment of the G77 and China to advancing multilateralism and global cooperation as the centerpiece for achieving the noble goals of the United Nations. Uganda's assumption of the chairmanship coincides with the group's 60th anniversary. I have no doubt that with such capable leadership, Uganda will confidently carry forth the torch of leadership for a prosperous, united, and stronger South. I should also like to recognize and commend the outgoing dynamic chair, Cuba, for its extraordinary and insightful leadership of the group during these trying times of geopolitical tensions and multifaceted challenges. Excellencies, our world is confronted by a confluence of crises, from the lingering impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic to rising inflation, from a worsening crisis of debt distress to the harsh realities of climate change, which for many, especially the most vulnerable, is a real existential threat. In parallel, escalating geopolitical tensions, wars, and conflicts have risen to the fore, shattering the lives of millions and putting the safety and security of the entire planet at risk. At the forefront of these is the harrowing humanitarian catastrophe in the Gaza Strip. Generations of families suffering irreparable trauma and loss, children undergoing amputations without anesthesia, entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble in one fell swoop. With half the population facing starvation and tens of thousands dead in just over 100 days, the world is looking to the United Nations for answers. The General Assembly has not sat idly in the face of this crisis. It has been both active and ambitious, often led by this very group of member states. It has demanded an immediate humanitarian ceasefire for all parties to comply with their obligations under international law and for the immediate release of all hostages and humanitarian access. I assure you that I shall not tire of reiterating these urgent demands, and I will do so for as long as it takes. I count on the collective leadership of this group to do the same. In tandem, we are witnessing mounting frustration with and the complete rejection of an unjust world order which continuously relegates the interests of the Global South to the margins of the international community's list of priorities. Now more than ever, the G77 and all nations must come together and build bridges of dialogue, hope, and cooperation to create a more fair, more just, and more prosperous world for all. Your presence here today as leaders of the Global South underscores the fact that the Group of 77 and China, as the largest and most diverse group in the United Nations, has a pivotal role to play in shaping a new world order that is more inclusive and leaves no one and no country behind. While our challenges today are profound and perverse, the reality is that we have been struggling for quite some time. Several developing countries had already veered off course in their pursuit of the Sustainable Development Goals, even prior to the pandemic, and the extant conflicts we see today. Not surprisingly, the most vulnerable of our societies have borne the brunt of these adverse external events, with countless pushed back into hunger and poverty. And environmental emergencies, including climate change, have only grown in severity and impact year on year without robust and adequate climate action for course correction. Against this backdrop, our cherished multilateral system, the policy apparatus for problem-solving international cooperation, is facing an acute crisis, with legitimate questions of current relevance and credibility arising and intensifying time and again. Purposeful dialogue, solidarity, and cooperation are in retreat, clearing an opportunistic path for divisive forces that breathe paralysis and disaffection. We are quite literally at a fork in the road. We must therefore seize the opportunity of summits such as this to rededicate ourselves to the core values and principles that remain as relevant and compelling today as they ever were. Multilateral organizations, including the United Nations and the international financial institutions, must undergo urgent and radical reform to better recognize and leverage the significance of the Global South. We need an international financial system rooted in inclusion and equity, inspiring and bolstering the full commitment to multilateralism, fostering SDG-aligned investments, and breaking the vicious cycle of debt and interest compounding for developing countries. We must harness the full power and opportunities of South-South and triangular cooperation, not per se to supplant our relations with the North, but rather to rebalance them and thereby magnify the global resonance of the stubborn unity and solidarity of the South. We all know that the G77 and China is no stranger to strife and perseverance, precisely because it was founded on a robust solidarity with the aim of furthering the principles of multilateralism. A majority of the G77 members have shared histories of colonialism, struggles of liberation, struggles for liberation, equality, and the pursuit of independence. Along with the lasting legacy of resilience, these are the cornerstones to the unity that historically binds the G77. And these must continue to be embraced as the group's collective strength in the face of the enormous risks and threats ahead. As President of the General Assembly, I am committed to these very priorities and principles: solidarity, cooperation, inclusion, and not forgetting support for the most vulnerable, so that we remain faithful to our own dictum of leaving no one behind. This new year offers an opportunity to shift our collective trajectory and to make common cause in our determination to craft a new narrative that incentivizes and supports effective global transformation in bringing those left out, overlooked, and perhaps even forgotten into the mainstream of sustainable development. A series of pivotal events on the UN Sustainable Development calendar are noteworthy. First is the 4th International Conference on Small Island Developing States in Antigua and Barbuda. Secondly, the 3rd United Nations Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries in Rwanda. And thirdly, the first ever UN General Assembly Sustainability Week, a flagship initiative of my presidency, being convened from the 15th to the 19th of April 2024 at UN headquarters, focusing on sustainability themes in selected sectors, namely tourism, transport, energy, infrastructure, as well as a signature event on debt sustainability, which of course is a major concern to members of the G77. Sustainability Week will build on the 2023 SDG Summit and seek to accelerate our path to 2030 in order to achieve the promise of the SDGs as well as that of the Paris Agreement. I am confident I can count on the constructive engagement of the G77 and China at the highest possible level to ensure that this week amply positions us to take forward what will unarguably be the defining multilateral process of our generation, that of the Summit of the Future. The summit aspires, among other things, to accelerate implementation of the 2030 Agenda, to rectify key governance gaps, and to ensure member states uphold their commitments to development. The G77 and China must play a crucial role in shaping the outcome of the summit, insofar as it will recalibrate the relationship between the global North and the South. In that regard, the application of modern technology to support human welfare will be a key area of focus, and so the G77 will need to be alert to ensure that such technologies contribute to closing as distinct from increasing the development gap. I also encourage your continued engagement in the intergovernmental negotiations for the Declaration on Future Generations and the Global Digital Compact, the potential economic benefits of which are extraordinary, though with probable social and societal risks. How we balance the benefits versus the costs is a critical issue for contemplation by the G77 and China. I call upon you all to actively support impactful transformation, a transformation that goes beyond statistics and annual reports, one that instead translates into tangible human and developmental progress, that creates a more secure, safe, and peaceful world and a more sustainable planet. Despite the challenges, I am certain that together we can seize this moment to unlock new commitments and adopt innovative policies that leave no one behind. Excellencies, together as one G77 and China, let us commit at this summit to work even harder to rebuild trust, to reignite global solidarity, and to harness the power and potential of multilateralism to secure and deliver peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for everyone, everywhere. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Denis Francis, President of the 78th Session of the United Nations General Assembly, for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations.
Your Excellency, President Museveni, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. It is a pleasure to join you for this very important summit. I thank the government of Uganda for its hospitality and congratulate it on the leadership of the G77 plus China. 60 years ago, recognizing the need for unity and solidarity in the face of common challenges, the G77 was born. Over the decades, you have been an engine for South-South cooperation and development, lifted millions of people out of poverty, and provided a powerful voice for developing countries on the global stage. Today, you are the largest grouping of the Global South, representing 80% of the world's population. And your solidarity and partnership are essential to building a sustainable, peaceful, and just world for all. A world in which the United Nations Charter, international law, and human rights prevail in global relations. Excellencies, halfway to the 2030 deadline for the Sustainable Development Goals, far from leaving no one behind, we are leaving half the world behind. Progress on poverty and hunger is stalling, and in some countries going into reverse. Many G77 members are grappling with an economic hangover from the COVID-19 pandemic, crippling debts, a cost of living crisis, and sky borrowing costs. Hundreds of millions of people around the world, particularly women and girls, are living without the most basic respect for their human rights, and the lack of jobs is generating enormous frustration among young people. Climate disasters, most of you did little to create, are knocking chunks out of your economies and increasing people's suffering. Investment in sustainable development and climate action is slipping further out of reach. And while South-South cooperation is strong and deepening, it does not replace the need for the respect of the commitment of the Global North, for sustained engagement to reduce poverty and inequality, support growth, and build resilience in developing countries. Digital technologies have enormous potential for good, but they are also inflaming inequalities. The International Monetary Fund warns that artificial intelligence could make things even worse. And peace, the foundation of sustainable development, is breaking down amidst a climate of global impunity. Around the world, from Sudan to Ukraine, the Middle East and beyond, wars are devastating lives, fueling mass movements of people, disrupting global supply chains, and threatening to set entire regions alight. In Gaza, Israel's military operations have spread massive destruction and killed civilians on a scale unprecedented during my time as Secretary General, including more than 150 members of our own staff, following the horrific terror attacks by Hamas on 7 October. This is heartbreaking and utterly unacceptable. The Middle East is a tinderbox. We must do all we can to prevent conflict igniting across the region. And that starts with an immediate humanitarian ceasefire to relieve the suffering in Gaza, allow humanitarian aid to reach everyone in need, and facilitate the release of hostages, which should be immediate and unconditional. The repeated refusal yesterday to accept the two-state solutions for Israeli and Palestinians is totally unacceptable, as I told the summit of the non-aligned movement. The denial of the right to statehood for the Palestinian people would indefinitely prolong a conflict that has become a major threat to global peace and security, exacerbate polarization, and embolden extremists everywhere. Excellencies, righting our troubled world depends on effective global action. Yet the international system is out of date, out of time, and out of step, reflecting a bygone age when many of your countries were still colonized. The United Nations Security Council is paralyzed by geopolitical divisions, and its composition does not reflect the reality of today's world. It must be reformed. And the global financial system, including the Bretton Woods institutions, have failed to provide a global safety net for developing countries in distress, as it was created after the Second World War in a totally different global economic situation. Yet, amidst all this gloom, there is hope. Last year, the SDG Summit issued a strong political declaration thanks in large part to the advocacy and tenacity of G77 countries. And this year, we have an opportunity to build on that success. The Summit of the Future, to be held in New York in September, is a generational opportunity. It aims to reform and revitalize multilateralism so that it works for everyone, everywhere, and meets the challenges of today. It is a chance to create the conditions for countries to achieve the SDGs, to find consensus on frameworks to address new challenges, and to build a better world for us all. We rely on the G77 plus China to make the Summit of the Future a success, to seize this opportunity and to find common solutions. The Summit will consider deep reforms of the international financial architecture. Financial institutions and frameworks created after the Second World War still largely correspond to the power relations and the global economy of that time. They must be reformed so that they are truly universal, reflect with justice the realities of today, and are much more responsive to the needs of developing countries. I have also proposed an SDG stimulus of $500 billion a year in affordable long-term finance for sustainable development and climate action in developing countries. And the multilateral development banks must be adequately capitalized and must change their business models to leverage far more private finance for developing countries at reasonable costs. The SDG stimulus calls for urgent action on debt, including breathing space for countries facing unbearable repayment schedules. And it calls for the expansion of the contingency financing for countries in need, including through the rechanneling of special drawing rights. Momentum is building. All countries backed these proposals in the SDG Summit last year, but now we must turn them into reality. So, Excellencies, beyond the Summit of the Future, I ask you to unite against climate catastrophe. The very existence of some countries in this room depends on limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, in line with the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities in light of different national circumstances. I urge you to hold developed countries to account for climate justice and for leading an equitable and just transition based on the phase-out of fossil fuels and massive investment in renewable energy. All financial commitments must be met. Clarifying the delivery of the $100 billion and doubling adaptation finance by 2025 are only starting points. The Loss and Damage Fund is a step forward and a testament to the power of the Global South. But we must call for meaningful contributions that have not yet been announced. And we must also advocate for an ambitious new finance goal for the future at COP29. And we must not forget that the just and equitable energy transition includes producing and trading critical minerals in a way that is fair, sustainable, and provides maximum benefit to developing countries. They must be more than simple exporters of raw materials. Excellencies, new technologies can turbocharge progress towards the SDGs. Our proposed Global Digital Compact aims to ensure that in a new technological era, no one is left behind. And I hope it will be agreed at the Summit of the Future. And the high-level body on artificial intelligence that I created, which includes several experts from G77 countries, and is balanced 50% North and 50% South, has already made preliminary recommendations on global artificial intelligence governance, including with the objective of accelerating the Sustainable Development Goals. The new Scientific Advisory Board is also working to ensure scientific breakthroughs are shared equally for the benefit of all. And I praise the efforts done by the presidency of Cuba to put science and technology in the center of G77 concerns. I encourage you to engage in all these efforts. The 21st century cannot replicate the vast inequalities of the 20s. Do not let new rules for new technologies be written by the rich for the rich. Excellencies, let us face it, those that benefit most from the present global governance system are unlikely to lead its reform. So momentum for change must come from you. I urge you to keep driving these efforts forward. We have a chance to cultivate a just, peaceful and prosperous future where no one is left behind. But for that, a lot needs to be changed and reformed. Together, let's unite to fight to make it a reality, and I thank you.
I thank His Excellency, the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Liu Guozheng, Special Representative of the President of China, member of the Political Bureau of the Chinese Communist Party Central Committee, and Vice Premier of the State Council of the People's Republic of China, as a special guest.
Your
Excellency, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Your Excellencies, heads of state and government, and heads of international organizations, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to attend this South Summit as the special representative of President Xi Jinping. I wish to express my appreciation to the government of Uganda for its thoughtful arrangements and congratulations on their assumption of chairmanship. And I want to thank Cuba's efforts and contribution in the past period. The title of my speech is Seeking Strength Through Unity and Forging Ahead with Enterprise to Jointly Write a New Chapter in South Cooperation. This year marks the 60th anniversary of the founding of the Group of 77, or G77. Over the past 6 decades, mechanisms such as the G77 and China have been instrumental in helping countries of the South beat a right path forward, one that advocates equality, mutual trust, mutual benefit, solidarity, and mutual assistance. Today, the G77 counts more than 130 member states, covering over 2/3 of the UN membership, and has become an important force to be reckoned with in international affairs. Its achievements are a source of pride, and its experience is truly valuable. Independence is the defining political feature of countries of the South. Most countries of the South share a past of trudging through the mire of colonialism. We do not flinch in safeguarding national independence and dignity, and we do not slacken in exploring development paths suited to our national realities. We never succumb to external interference, strive to safeguard the rights to subsistence and development, resolutely reject hegemonism and power politics, and hold firm in our own hands the future of our country's development and the well-being of our nations. In an ever-changing international landscape, we have gained a strong foothold and at the same time promoted the progress of human society. Seeking strength through unity is a glorious tradition of countries of the South. President Xi Jinping pointed out that South-South cooperation is a great creative undertaking by developing countries to seek strength through unity. We have been deepening South-South cooperation, advancing North-South dialogue, and standing together in international affairs. The G77 and China is our important cooperation mechanism within the framework of the UN. Countries of the South have also created such platforms as the BRICS and the African Union to send common messages and uphold shared interests. Not long ago, the BRICS realized a historic expansion, which strengthened the momentum of solidarity and cooperation among emerging markets and developing countries, and boosted the morale of the Global South to forge ahead in unity. Pursuing development and rejuvenation is a historical mission of countries of the South. Seizing the opportunities of economic globalization, countries of the South have been promoting trade and investment, liberalization and facilitation, and carrying out bilateral, regional, and multilateral cooperation, thereby realizing fairly fast economic and social development. Today, countries of the South account for half of the world economy, 42% of global trade, and half of high-tech exports. We are visibly narrowing the gap with developed countries. Countries of the South now contribute to nearly 60% to global growth, according to statistics from international institutions. Equity and justice are the common aspiration of countries of the South. We always address major international issues based on their merits, making fair remarks and taking fair actions. In mechanisms including the UN, the G20, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, we have played a constructive role. We have made it possible to establish New Development Bank, the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, the Silk Road Fund, among other financial institutions, guiding the trend of international cooperation and making the global governance system more fair and equitable. Ladies and gentlemen, changes unseen in a century are unfolding at a faster pace in the world, and the collective rise of countries of the South is unstoppable. Yet, the unjust and inequitable international political and economic order from the past continues to have lingering effects. Factors hindering world peace and development have not been eradicated, and countries of the South are facing an increasingly complex external environment. We need to renew our efforts to forge a united, equal, balanced, and inclusive global development partnership and build a community with a shared future for mankind. To this end, I wish to put forward 3 proposals. First, we need to be brave and determined in exploring our path to modernization. Modernization as an aspiration is universal among all countries, but the ways leading to it cannot fit into one single model. We need to put our people at the center, stay grounded in our own realities and traditions, learn from other civilizations, and explore paths to modernization that fit our own development. We need to seize the opportunities created by the latest round of technological revolution and industrial transformation, thus achieving leapfrog economic and social development. China is advancing the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation on all fronts through a Chinese path to modernization. We look forward to joining hands with countries of the South and achieving modernization together, leaving no one behind. Second, we need to pursue higher quality South-South cooperation. Countries of the South at various stages of development and with diverse endowments of resources enjoy considerable complementarities in economic structures. We need to seek strength through unity, enhance the synergy of development strategies, and continue to unlock the potential for cooperation to make countries of the South more competitive as a whole. China is ready to focus on practical cooperation and capacity building and conduct cooperation in a broader way and in more areas to unleash the potential for growth, address the difficulties holding back development, and improve people's well-being. Third, we need to actively participate in the reform of the global governance system, complying to the common call of all countries, especially developing countries, and raising our representation and voice in meaningful ways is critical to tackling the age-old problems in international governance. We need to jointly call for an equal and orderly multipolar world and a universally beneficial and inclusive economic globalization, build an open world economy, firmly promote trade and investment liberalization and facilitation, resolutely oppose the attempt to roll back globalization and abuse the concept of security, and foster a global environment conducive to the development of countries of the South. We need to jointly support the reform of the WTO and the international financial system, and to make international development agencies more efficient in supporting countries of the South. We need to bring development to the center of the global economic policy framework, urge developed countries to earnestly deliver on their commitments of official development assistance and climate financing, and speed up the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Poverty is a primary challenge for the development of countries of the South. China encourages the UN Secretary General to nominate a special envoy for poverty eradication in order to promote global poverty reduction. Ladies and gentlemen, China firmly supports countries of the South in realizing common development. In the early days of its founding, New China began assisting other countries to the best of its capacity. More than 70 years on, thousands of complete projects and projects for providing goods and materials have been implemented. Over 10,000 technical cooperation projects have been conducted, and over 400,000 training opportunities have been provided to developing countries. In all these endeavors, we have never attached political strings or interfered in other countries' internal affairs, winning deep friendship from countries of the South. In recent years, President Xi Jinping has put forward the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, the Global Development Initiative, GDI, and the Global Security Initiative, GSI, and the Global Civilization Initiatives, GCI. The aim is to promote common development, lasting stability, enduring security, and mutual learning among civilizations, and laying the groundwork for a bright prospect of peace, security, prosperity, and progress in the world. Belt and Road Cooperation has had more than 3,000 projects and galvanized over $1 trillion of investment globally in the past decade since its launch. The GDI has generated more than 10 international cooperation platforms in its 8 priority areas and over 200 cooperation projects on the ground. Working closely with 20 international organizations, China has implemented over 130 trilateral cooperation projects in nearly 60 countries in areas such as poverty reduction, food security, public health, and climate change. More than 30 million people have benefited from these projects. And the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development received a good boost. President Xi Jinping has underlined that China, as a developing country and one of the global South, has invariably stood in solidarity with fellow developing countries through thick and thin. China will continue to take South-South cooperation as a priority in its cooperation with other countries, stand together and work in concert with G77 members, and contribute to the common development of countries of the South with its philosophy and progress in pursuing Chinese modernization. Thank you.
I want to thank His Excellency Liu Guozhong for his statement, and this brings us to the end of the opening session. We are now going for a group photograph. And when we come back, the press are declared undesirable, and they should not be here. We should be only the conference people. I thank you. Let's continue to the next program.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, honorary heads of delegation, honorary heads of states and heads of delegation will be exiting through the front door. The rest of us should remain seated. And as His Excellency announced, when we return, it will be a closed session. The media and observers will stay out, but will advise observers and invited guests when they return. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, keep seated apart from heads of states and heads of delegation, please. Your Excellencies, please take your seats and we resume the session. Take your seats. Thank you.
The plenary now starts. We need to adopt the first item is to adopt the agenda and the program of work. Then also the agenda has been circulated. The agenda and the program of work have been circulated. Any objections? I don't see any, and the agenda and the program of work are adopted. I now ask the Ambassador of Cuba, the UN, to present the report of the senior officials meeting and the adoption of the outcome documents of the summit.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Honorables jefes de Estado y de Gobierno, excelencias, señoras y señores. Tengo el honor de presentarles, en nombre de los altos funcionarios, los resultados de la reunión celebrada el jueves 18 de enero de 2024, con el fin de ultimar el proyecto de documento final para su consideración por parte de nuestros jefes de Estado y de Gobierno y otros jefes de delegaciones. Las delegaciones presentes en la reunión debatieron extensamente una propuesta alternativa presentada por una delegación en relación con un párrafo del proyecto de documento final, el cual, tras casi 4 horas de discusión, no contó con el consenso de la sala. En el transcurso de nuestras deliberaciones y en aras de propiciar un acuerdo, se presentaron también otras propuestas y sugerencias que no lograron fructificar. La inmensa mayoría de las delegaciones participantes consideró que no era apropiado reabrir el documento, el cual es resultado de numerosas horas de discusión en Nueva York. Ante este escenario, el presidente decidió recomendar la adopción del proyecto de documento final sin modificaciones por parte de los jefes de Estado y Gobierno y otros jefes de delegación. Deseamos agradecer a las delegaciones por su espíritu constructivo, la flexibilidad y solidaridad demostrada en el curso de todo el proceso de consultas, con el propósito de tener un documento que refleje los intereses comunes